everyone. I hope that's a good soundtrack to start your day if you're listening to this when it drops at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This show was a show that I kind of switched it up last minute. It was our Saturday show, which is called our Saturday Free Show. And we call it the Saturday Free Show because we don't stop after an hour and go to a patron-only portion of the show. And I had watched a YouTube video that kept showing up in my feed of things I should watch, and it was called How to Watch the Cosby Show, or a leftist way to view the Cosby Show, or something along those lines. Actually, I don't even think the person that makes the video, who was on the show, his name was actually José. I don't think he actually gives out his political leanings too much when he does these analysis. But it did come off as a bit of a leftist analysis of what the Cosby Show was. And the gentleman that made it, it's about almost 2 hours. The gentleman that made it actually watched all 8 seasons of Cosby. He said it took him a couple months to actually dissect it all, digest it all, and then read a series of academic papers about the Cosby, which there are more than people think. And I definitely have my personal opinions about what came after Cosby, because there felt like there was a reaction to the isolated world that the Cosbys lived in, especially the era in which that show happens. It happens in Reagan's America, and they are a reflection of black progress in Reagan's America. We don't say post-racial, or what I kind of prefer, I think the term is less post-racial, more of post-racism. We don't say that when we refer to the Cosby Show. I think that term is kind of left to the Obama presidency, but if anything was going to show you what the post-racism world would look like, it would probably be Cosby, right? And I don't say that in any sort of positive way, like the Cosby Show is some sort of utopian fantasy of what the world is going to be in a world without racism. But that's kind of what you got from that. And in the video, you're going to hear the intro before we bring in our guests, Napoleon the Legend and José, who made the video. I put the Chris Rock bit in there, the Chris Rock niggas and black people bit, because as, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but I did. So after I watched this Cosby thing, I went down a bit. I'm going to talk about it on the show. I don't want to get into it too much here. You don't want to get redundant. But I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole of watching this Chris Rock bit and talking to a good friend of mine and friend of the show who was working on an essay about the Chris Rock bit. And when you listen to that bit, and actually a lot of that special, it is a lot of underclass ideology, bootstrapping, right? No class analysis, simply racialized. Niggas and black people. There's good black people, but there's these horrible underclass black people that make everything bad for us good black people, which harkens back to a show we did with Preston Smith. I think it's episode 132, where we opened that show with a video that Pascal had recommended to me from the 60s, the early 60s. And so we're talking the era of redlining, right? And it is a bunch of middle-class black people that are pushing back against a migration of Southern, less educated, poor black people moving into their neighborhood in Southern California. I don't remember if it was Compton particularly, but it was definitely Southern California. All this stuff is swirling in my head, and then I found this archive of ebony magazines online. So from the 50s all the way to 2000s, and there was two interesting editions. In August of 73, my birth month is August, by the way, 19th. There's a whole issue on the black middle class with like Marxist analysis of the black middle class and crises in the politics with this new burgeoning black middle class and the black poor. And then there was an issue in August of 87, I was 10, called The New Black Middle Class. I speak about that on the show. If you want to watch the show live time, where we put all these links up in the description and in the chat, there's one way to do it. YouTube.com/This is Revolution Podcast. That's the best way to do it. Wherever you're listening to this show, there are links in the description to all the social media where we go live Tuesday, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific time for the free show. I'm talking too long because this is my shut up music. And I am out. Hello and good morning, everyone. Sorry, I still have chill music playing. Hello and good morning, everyone. It's morning for me, maybe not for some of you guys. Happy Saturday. It's going to be a good show today. I've watched recently, there's a young man who's coming on the show today. I'm actually pretty excited to have him on. I see him in the virtual green room now, who made a leftist critique, I would say, of how to view the Cosby Show. And it kind of got me thinking. And then I was talking to one of our friends of show, about that. And then he brought up the Chris Rock, bring the pain, niggas and black people bit. And it took me down this rabbit hole that got even deeper, to the point where I found archives of Ebony magazine, and I'm reading Ebony magazines from 1973 that are questioning and dealing with the black middle class. This is going to be a very interesting, spicy discussion. And who else better to have this discussion with than the man that writes for Black Agenda Report, the man that is not afraid to mow anyone, even me.
That man is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. We're talking about black people today, brother.
We are talking about black people.
Did your mom cook you some collard greens and pork chops or something? Because
my mom does not.
Jason, he inboxes me. He's like, "Yo, we're gonna talk about black people." I was like, "Jason, you sound."
I've been trying to call past. We had kind of a slightly different tone set for the show because of one of the special guests that are coming on. I'm going to bring it in a second, and I was like, No. We can still talk about all that shit, but we have to tackle this. And so I'm pretty excited about this. Also, you know him as the biggest, baddest black man in Maine. He is Marcus, the left flank Vance.
Yo, what's up? I did Maine things today. I woke up this morning. I got outside. I went blueberry picking.
Oh,
that's something they do in Maine. It's nice. It was enjoyable. Get out in nature.
I thought you were going to say you went lobstering. I would have been like, "Oh, okay, that's real."
I would have been pretty impressed with lobstering. Also, my first time in Maine, someone told me to eat a lobster roll. I think I told you the story, and they took us to the wrong spot because that shit. They gave us a lobster on a dry ass bun with some mayonnaise packets.
That's it. I've never seen anything different. I've never put a lobster roll in my mouth.
Whole ass sandwich. Then I was like, get this shit out of my face. It's hell of expensive for some bullshit.
Yeah. They have lobster rolls at McDonald's up here.
That's what's up. But that shit that gave me, if I go to McDonald's in Canada and get poutine, I know what the fuck I'm getting. I'm getting McDonald's Canada poutine. If someone tells me, "Oh, you got to go to this spot in Portland, Maine, by the water with this guy that talks like Peter Griffin is going to give you this goddamn," motherfucker hands me a bunch of lobster with some mayonnaise packets. I was like, brother, if you don't get out of my face with this bullshit, you ain't got no special sauce on this bitch. Anyway.
Isn't poutine the cheese with fries or something like that?
Cheese and whack ass gravy. Whack ass gravy.
It is like high school lunch gravy.
I'm calling out your gravy, Canada. If somebody likes gravy, I've been there. That shit was whack as fuck. It was gravy out of a can. Whack ass. You might as well go to Maine with them punk ass sandwiches.
Although I think a lobster roll could use a little bit of gravy.
It could use anything. That shit was dry. So fucking mad. I was, you didn't make the mayo. It's not even, you just gave me a packet.
No, don't.
Bitch ass shit. Anyway, before we bring in our special guests, let us play the clip to get you guys ready. And I will warn you, the clip uses profanity.
Oh, what the fuck?
Now, we got a lot of things, a lot of racism going on in the world right now. Who's more racist, black people or white people? Black people. You know why? Because we hate black people too. Everything white people don't like about black people really don't like about black people. There's some shit going on with black people right now. It's like a civil war going on with black people. And there's two sides. It's black people and there's niggas. And niggas have got to go. Every time black people want to have a good time, ignorant ass niggas fuck it up.
When this Chris Rock bit debuted in the late 90s, it was lauded as a brutally honest look into the contradicting realities of black America. Chris Rock was being called the new Pryor, and there were comparisons to Lenny Bruce. Rock was becoming a mouthpiece for black America, but was his most powerful bit anything more than underclass ideology? A curse-filled, Cosby-esque bootstrapping manifesto? In this episode, we'll take a deeper dive into the Reagan-era respectability politics that dominated popular culture and the fascination with black excellence. This is Revolution.
Niggas. Tired of niggas, man. Damn, man. for some shit they supposed to do. For some shit they just supposed to do. A nigga will brag about some shit a normal man just does. A nigga will say some shit like, I take care of my kids. You supposed to, you dumb motherfucker. What you talking about?
I'm sorry, he's ruined, he's butchering it. Could you just let me, every time black people want to have a good time, some ignorant ass I take care of my kids. Wait. You always want credit for something they're supposed to do.
I hope you appreciated me putting that at the end.
That was rather traumatizing.
Did they do that in the show? I don't watch The Office, but like
that was the first episode. That's the first episode of second episode of The Office is I forget what it's called, but it's my favorite episode because that bit, of course, a guy like that is going to say that bit and think it's hilarious. So before we even start to pontificate, coming all the way live from somewhere in Europe, I don't want to divulge where, deep state, might get him. He's an MC. He's got a new record out. You may know him as the man that made the beats or some of the beats for the Michael Brooks show. We know him as friend of show, Napoleon the Legend.
What's up? Happy to be here, y'all.
Oh. Napoleon.
Mon frère haïtien.
And before these French Negroes.
Napoléon Noir.
Napoléon le Noir, c'est vrai. Hein?
Like comme Toussaint Louverture.
Bien sûr. Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Hein?
Yeah.
Also coming at us from the great North. What is Canada called again? What do they call it?
The Great White North.
The Great White North. The gentleman that actually made the Cosby expose. He actually makes a lot of interesting YouTube videos, breakdowns of pop culture. He will not be seen because also hiding from the deep state. Jose.
Hi.
Jose, our first guest.
Jose, how you living?
I'm doing all right. How are you all doing?
I'm doing all right, man. You kind of inspired my trip down this rabbit hole with your Cosby video essay that you made, which is almost 2 hours long. Before you came on, jokingly, we said, did he watch every damn episode of 8 seasons worth of Cosby? So did you rewatch it all?
Yeah. In fact, I would say a lot of it I was watching for the first time. I felt like if I'm going to be talking about this show, like the bare minimum I could do is try and watch the entire series. Yeah, it was a lot of watching over about, say, 2 months.
2 months.
So you didn't grow up with Cosby. I mean, of course you didn't grow up with Bill, but I mean watching the show.
No, it was just a bit before my time. So I was not quite there when it was on the air. And there were reruns, but it wasn't in heavy syndication here in Canada. I don't know why. We just didn't see a lot of reruns of The Cosby Show. We got a lot of other American shows, but
it just goes to show that you guys don't like black people.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say anything like that, but
But what, Napoleon, you watched Jose's video?
Yeah, actually, I did today, and it was really good. So shout out to you, Jose. That's what I was wondering. Like, did you just watch the whole binge watch the Cosby Show? Like, and kudos to you just for that. But it really made me look at it a different way because I was familiar with the Cosby Show growing up, but it's like I think I caught the tail end, and after a while I lost interest, so I wasn't really deep into it like that, you know.
Yeah,
and go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say I watched the video at like I think 1.5 speed. So even you speaking now, it seems like I need to like readjust what your voice sounds like. But I don't know, for me, like, yeah, you know, like I'm mid-30s, so like coming up, I remember the tail end of the Cosby Show, but then there's like a whole bunch of other stuff that I think actually is like, you know, coming from, you know, like as I was watching your video, I was like, oh, you know, like Family Matters was like one that like I had watched a lot. And, you know, I'm not saying you got to do another video on that, but I saw a lot of comparisons between the two.
Yeah, definitely. Family Matters was a show I watched when I was younger, so I caught a lot of that. And I think about the Cosby Show is that even though it's like this old-fashioned kind of sitcom, in the 80s it was very much a break of what had been going on the previous decade, and it was so popular that it was obviously going to be hugely influential to every show that would come after it. And yeah, Family Matters is just such an obvious follow-on, and I think almost every sitcom that came after the Cosby Show in some way was responding to it, either trying to mimic what it was doing with like the wholesome family, or it was trying to reject it and present something that was very different.
Well, a friend of mine who shall remain nameless, friend of Pascal and I's, calls the 90s the era of the coon. Once you get rid of Cosby, there's always a coon in the show. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, In the House, Family Matters to that matter. I hate calling Jaleel White that. He was a kid playing a role. But there's something to be said about the 90s response to Cosby, which to me was a response to shows like Family Ties, which definitely is also before your time, which is another one of those shows where like the kids, and you mentioned this in your video, where the kids are actually smarter than the parents and kind of running the show. Cosby is definitely a rejection of that. Kind of takes you back to those 50s Father Knows Best-ish type of shows. But definitely didn't deal with any real racial tension. And I know that's one of Pascal's real beefs, because he grew up in New York at around the same time as that show is going on. And there's some crazy shit happening in New York in 84. Bernard Goetz was about in 84, right?
Right. Yes, that was Bernard Goetz was 84.
And if you guys don't know who Bernard Goetz is, he is the guy that was riding a subway and claims that 4 black kids were looking to attack him, and he shot him. And after he shot him, one was hunched over, and he walked up to that one. And this is what he says on camera in the police confessional. You look like you're fine here, have another. And that young man actually was paralyzed for life and suffered some brain damage from that.
And he was acquitted.
Yes, he actually ran for mayor of New York.
That's correct.
And that's in 84. So this is the first season Cosby comes out. You have Bernard Goetz, then you have Yusef Hawkins, and
you have the Howard Beach incident. There was a whole rash of racially motivated either police interactions or just internal racial conflicts with various ethnic groups in New York City at that time. And New York was very much a racial powder keg. It was under the Ed Koch administration, and Ed Koch was not known particularly to be a mayor that was friendly to the concerns of black constituents in the city. So for me, and I am old enough to remember when the Cosby Show initially aired, I found that this kind of like the Shangri-La depiction of black people living in Brooklyn in New York City in the 80s under Ed Koch's tutelage. And it wasn't even about the whole class makeup of like, oh, he's a doctor, the wife's a lawyer. It was just really this kind of this total malaise of like, oh, it's all wonderful, everything's okay, life is, and I found that kind of really offensive. And let's not forget, right? This is going on at the apex of the Reagan administration as well. And, I cannot remember a single episode of The Cosby Show that illustrates any contemporary commentary of the politics or the administration that was governing at that time. you talk about this happens. Cosby Show starts in '84. Jesse Jackson is running for '84. No mention of that. Not that we should be, supporters or sanguine about Jesse Jackson's run for president, but compare that to shows like Good Times or The Jeffersons, in which the political economy or the politics of the particular era were always kind of discussed, whether it was about stagflation, or whether it was about prices or cost of living or things of that nature, or the racial politics at that time. There was always a kind of context in terms of the political reality of Black life that were discussed. But in a larger context, right? We should, for me, I think we should always be circumspect about the way in which Black popular cultural production is used as a way of political demobilization. And this goes back to something Jason knows based on that piece I wrote on Clarence Avant, is that if you read the Kerner Commission report out of 67, 68, in the section on Black media, where they actually talk about the fact that they need to increase and proliferate things like sitcoms about Black life or television shows depicting Black people. And this is to be done as a means to politically demobilize Black people and get them away from radical politics that fostered the urban rebellions. That we should be always cognizant that whenever we're seeing the dispatch of Black cultural production in the post-civil rights era, whether it be television, film, music, athletic, that it is innately political. And it is not political in a way that is about fostering rebellion or challenge to the system among Black folk. It is political in that it's part of this consistent stretch of 50-year counter-revolutionary demobilization. And we can talk about how there's some high points and low points. We could talk about, well, what about music like Public Enemy? We could talk about what about, hip hop? We could talk about the variety of ways, and we have different iterations of Black popular culture and music that come about during that period. But what we can also talk about is that there were no real movements that come out of that period until the post-Obama era either. So in one context, we can say that demobilization did function quite effectively.
But would you guys all agree that kind of across the board there was no movements, not just in Black America, but anywhere? What movements were really going on in Reagan's 80s? If anything, the imagery that we get through pop culture, and I know you're a little younger, Jose, I don't know if you kind of noticed this in a lot of the things that you made, is that of aspiration, right? Working Girl, Secret of My Success. Then there's always a Black movie that is kind of, Strictly Business. All these kind of aspirational films that capitalism will lead us to some sort of happy promised land.
Yeah, that's actually something I noticed in, when I did a retrospective of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That was sort of the big conclusion I got at the end of that show, because, we all know the premise. Will Smith lives with a rich family in Bel-Air. And what started off as like this interesting culture clash, got this like upper class family and and Will, this like working class kid. And you expect to see some interaction, some back and forth, but by the end of the 6th season, you realize like that place has changed Will. Like he's a completely different guy. And the whole message is like, now he's on the right path. Now he's learned how to live. And the way to make it in the world and to live properly, I guess, is to be like the Banks family. And like, that really just, I think represents a lot of what you guys are saying right now.
And Jason did even ask a question, thinking back, it was like maybe Ralph Nader's campaign is like the closest thing.
2000.
Yeah.
You're talking like 10 years down the road.
Yeah. Well, that like, I'm like thinking it was like literally like that's like the only thing that even bubbled up pre Obama, where you're getting actual, or even like anti, like Iraq War, I think would bite, but that got stamped down pretty quickly. Yeah, not a whole lot out there as far as like movements and nothing sustainable. That's for damn
And you
sure.
had the anti-apartheid, but that was really kind of.
And that, look, when Jose brought that up, that Bill Cosby had to push to get a bumper sticker on Theo's door that says "abolish apartheid." And if you think about the anti-apartheid rhetoric of that era, to me, unless you were really in that scene or maybe a college student, Pascal, you were in school at that time, so it was probably a lot more prevalent for you than it was for me. Nobody was really talking about anti-apartheid.
It was kind of a chic college student-based kind of I remember my freshman year in college, there was a kind of anti-apartheid protest on the school, campus. No one was talking about how the role, the Cuban government had in fighting, fighting
about any of that
government in Angola and the Battle of Cueto Carnaval. No one was discussing that at all, But no, I generally the large point I'm trying to say is that I look at that period post 1970s, right? As a period of demobilization. People always kind of wonder, how do we kind of get into this position of massive neoliberalization where, as Dhruba bin Wahad, who was our guest, said something really interesting, I think stuck with us. He was like, we're fighting battles that we already won 50 plus years ago.
Shots were fired on that one.
All over again, right? And the question becomes, right, what happened to Black politics from the early 70s until the Obama era, where there is this kind of complacency with the status quo, in which there is not a massive movement. And one of the things that I think is interesting in what Jason kind of dug up from Ebony Magazine is that he particularly focused on two articles. One was an Ebony Magazine article about the Black middle class in 1972 or 73.
Yeah.
And another one was an article about the Black middle class from 1987. And what Jason was sharing with me is that it's interesting to see how the Ebony Magazine is not known to be a revolutionary, radical publication at all. It's generally known to be a publication that, basically illustrates and demonstrates the aspirationalism of the Black middle class. But because of this 1972 or 73 issue, now let's remember that 1972 is the Gary, Indiana political convention, where you have all of these radical activists coming out of the late 60s, as well as with the traditional Black political leaders meeting in Gary, Indiana, to kind of try to chart out the political future of Black America. If anyone wants to read a very good book that talks about this period and this movement, friend of the show, Cedric Johnson's book, From Race Leaders, From Revolutionaries to Race Leaders. It's a very good book that talks about how this era really gives us the birth of the modern Black political class, because out of the Gary Convention, you see that the Black political elites who were more proximate or closer to the Democratic Party machinery take over the leadership of Black politics and Black political thought, and the radicals kind of lose direction, right? Also, let's not forget, during this period of time, you have Nixonian Black capitalism, the rise of the minority set-aside programs. So you have, again, middle-class Blacks getting contracts, construction contracts, building contracts. All of these means to mobilize capital on the part of the ruling class to neutralize Black middle-class adjacent people from having any sympathy with radical Black politics. And we start to see, as a consequence of that, and what the article that Jason talks about is very critical of the way things like the Great Society programs, foundation money, and things of that nature are starting to pour into Black communities to create this kind of class schism, where we have this burgeoning Black middle class. At the same time, right, let's not forget what's going on with the black poor and working class? We're getting the first iteration of mass incarceration. We're getting heroin. We're getting deindustrialization, black family dislocation.
And let's add to this, and it's James Foreman Jr. talks about it in his book. We get the first study around this time, and I don't know if you know about this, Jose or Napoleon, that says that marijuana is actually non-addictive. So we start to get the push to decriminalize marijuana, and the pushback on that literally comes from the black community.
Right, exactly. I mean, there are really James Foreman's book, "Locking Up Our Own," is a very good indictment of the posture in which the black political class takes in that era. There's another book that came out a couple of years earlier that talks about that specifically deals with middle class and working class black people's reaction to the increase in crime in the early 1970s. I have the book. I forgot the name. Please forgive me. But he talks about how there was significant support because black folk were beginning to buy and own homes, because black people were starting to, as a result of, Federal Housing Authority and the breaking of the racial covenants, were being able to move into the suburbs, that they were very concerned with, the increase in heroin, crime, and so on and so forth. And many of the leaders at that time, religious leaders and even political leaders who were the first iteration of that black political class, supported the Nixonian pivot to mass incarceration. They supported tough on crime politics. And I think that what we have to understand, and what is valuable from that lesson for us today, right, when we're having, slogans such as defund the police, regardless of what we think about defund the police on its merits, is that, something that's often said that kind of sounds like a trope, but it's the case, is that black people are not a monolith, and that not only are black people not a monolith, but they are varying class, social, political, and even cultural interests that exist in multiple black communities that can conflict in terms of what they want and the vision that they have. And that the attempt to facilitate looking at Black America as one unitary body facilitates a theme that we have on the show all the time, which is the politics of containment, where undemocratically black people do not have a say in what their politics are, but you have a class of individuals who become the ventriloquists for that mass, and the ruling class is able to dispose of them as this in one fell swoop.
And I definitely, and I want to bring this up. Someone says Colors. They're talking about the movie Colors, and when we talk about the politics of containment, Colors, and I'm sure Napoleon has seen it, because that's kind of like our era of movie. Marcus, I think you've seen it. Jose, I don't know if you've seen the movie Colors.
No, I told you I didn't see that one. You told me to see it. I've yet to see it.
Okay,
I gotta watch that.
You got to watch Colors, because Colors portrays LA in the 80s, in the late 80s. And they did have a horrible gang problem. I'm not from LA. I'm from about 6 hours north in the Bay, but LA had a horrible gang problem. And LA's police force had got militarized about 84 during the Olympics. That was kind of the permission for them to get all this money. And they were technologically advanced. They were tearing down actual houses with these police tanks. So when you watch the movie Colors, they're coming in with shotguns and like crowbars. But that wasn't how LAPD was operating at that time. But you're supposed to be in with the crash unit of LAPD, and that's what this movie is supposed to be, right? And part of it, too, is you see the old veteran cop played by Robert Duvall that's taking files, if you will, on all these young kids, and his very fiery partner, played by Sean Penn, doesn't like the fact that he's doing that, because he just wants to arrest these kids and throw them away in jail. The funny part about that is the problem was they were putting files on children, under 18-year-old children, in real life that was giving them a record. So if they did do anything, it wasn't a first offense. And to show it in this movie is kind of this innocent, benign thing that a caring cop is trying to do to try to help out the people in the community is extremely dishonest and doesn't really paint a fair picture of really what was happening in LA at that time. The only thing that I think is great about the movie Colors, that I think if you really want to watch and have a movie, have a pretty honest dialogue, is there's a scene where the people are yelling at the police for two things. Where the hell are you? Because these motherfuckers keep shooting up the neighborhood, and stop beating up our kids. At the same time, they're yelling at the cops for this at the same time. And there's a scene where they show that. And it's actually probably the most honest thing in that movie.
Well, you know, what's really interesting, Jason, is that you talk about Colors and you talk about this in the 80s. You know, who was mayor of Los Angeles in the 80s?
Tom Bradley.
Exactly. And this is something, you know, when we look at, you know, one of the things that I think that everyone on this show, particularly me and Jason, I think that we have I wouldn't say the luxury, one of the things that we're blessed to be able to do is to talk to people who take Black political history seriously. You know, people like Cedric, like Adolf, people like Dhoruba bin Wahab, who are living testimonies to Black history. People like Ajamu Baraka, you know, people who take Black political history seriously. And one of the consequences of that, I think, for us is that when you hear folks celebrating, like, you know, Barack Obama or the new Black political class or the first this or the first that, Jason and I are old enough to remember, like, this is not the first go around with this kind of discourse, man. Do people remember that in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, almost every major Black city in America at one point had a Black mayor? This is during
Marion Barry in DC.
This is during the 50-year counter-revolution, right? And again, these are mayors that are governing over a time when deindustrialization is plaguing Black communities, resources are shrinking, promises to be able to build, you know, the Black urban meccas are actually not being fulfilled. Or what you're having is the move to growth politics in the 80s, right? We start to see hyper-capitalization of urban environments, but in those areas, right, that are more Wall Street and financial friendly, gentrification starts kicking in. Black areas and environments start to be poured out, get filtered out because more white capital is getting in. And what seems to happen, right, is that there is no return on investment on a Black politics that translates into anything substantial for the Black poor and working class, while the Black middle class, a la Cosby, is like celebrating, a la Ebony Magazine in 1987, we have arrived.
Well, Jose, are you still with us? Okay.
Yeah, I'm still right here.
You had no idea that your show was gonna rate this. When you were watching Cosby, going off of what we're talking about right now, and you do talk about this in your show, in your video essay, were you kind of appalled a little bit about what you were seeing juxtaposed to the time that it was actually being done?
Yeah, I'll fully admit I don't have an in-depth knowledge of 1980s New York, but I had a suspicion it wasn't quite as rosy as the Cosby Show presented it. And there's actually one episode in particular. It was going to be in the video. I had to cut it for time reasons, and I wasn't even sure what to do with this because there was one episode, it might have been season 5 or 6. It started off with like this just ridiculous premise where Theo discovers a dead body. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why is Theo finding a dead body in the middle of the city? And I thought the episode would be about that in some capacity. What it turns into is Theo being interviewed by the news, and he thinks he's going to be a celebrity or a star now. And it becomes this weird story about Theo, like, oh, I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be a TV star. And the big twist at the end is like the news crew shows up and they get more interested in Rudy finding some baby birds in their backyard. And they never really go back to the dead body. It just like is there to start this weird story. And I think that encapsulates a lot of what the Cosby Show was. If there is something horrible happening in the world like that, to quickly distract you with some like wholesome, family-friendly, pleasant little story about, you know, Theo thinks he's a star now, or baby birds. That was probably the weirdest episode. And if I had known more about New York, I feel like I could have delved into it a bit deeper.
Well, now you know Pascal, and he will be more than happy to give you a very fiery explanation of New York from 81 to 87.
No, but you know what's funny about with him mentioning that? I feel like Bill Cosby was very aware of what's going on, and also self-aware about the critiques and the position he kind of held. So even like the little apartheid little stamp on the door or whatever, which it's really nothing, but that was his way to be like, look, I still know what's going on. And it seems like that dead body in the street was like this like easy way to be like, okay, we know violence is going on in the streets, but now we're gonna go back to just entertaining you. And I feel like even watching that expose on the Cosby Show, and it makes me, and when we talk about Fresh Prince and shows like that, it seems like it's a reinvention or repackaging of the American dream, and just selling it to us all over again. But the American dream is, once again, their way of seeing Black excellence, which is success, material things, money, and also being docile. And you know, you have to play by the rules. You gotta tame yourself some way, somehow. It seems like it's a reoccurring theme in these shows. It's almost like when you see pop stars, like stars that really break out in the mainstream, that are like, it seems like they're coached to be totally apolitical. Like, you know, like a Britney Spears or somebody like that. They're not gonna talk about Cuba. They're not gonna talk about apartheid. They're not talk about whatever's going on. They're just gonna entertain you, smile, look pretty, and do things. And I think these shows encapsulate that whole thing. When you were trying to get to the mainstream, let's just entertain these folks, distract these folks, give them that so they could just go back to work tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And like in the earlier seasons of the Cosby Show, I felt that was like especially strong in the way they were trying to fit into this, like, you know, predominantly white middle class. Even one thing I noticed was like the hair of particularly the women on the show. In the earlier seasons, it was very straight and very, you know, clearly trying to make it seem a bit more like white hair, I guess. In later seasons, they sort of eased up on that a little, and they introduced different kinds of hairstyles. But in those early seasons, it appeared as a show that didn't want to make any waves or disrupt anything. It was about fitting into that sort of that wider world on the rules they think or the rules that they feel are placed upon them.
Well, this is a really interesting question about, you know, the Black middle class that really goes back to books like E. Franklin Frazier's The Black Bourgeoisie. And I think many folks who come from the Black middle class would recoil at the suggestion that they want to be white. I think many of these people actually, you know, will argue that they have very much pride in their, you know, in their Blackness, in a particular type.
I hate that kind of like, these guys want to be white when they.
Right, I think it's a very simplistic and reductionist kind of, because they do have pride in being Black, but they have a pride in a particular type of Black identity. They have particular pride in, you know, their institutions, i.e., you know, the historically Black colleges, membership organizations, fraternities, sororities, the Links, Jack and Jill, their you know, secret societies, their you know, cotillions. When you read books, for example, like Our Kind of People, the author of that book recently died, which is a whole celebration of, like, you know, the Black upper middle class, and they're you know, going to the Vineyard and, you know, hanging out at the Inkwell and Oak Bluffs and all of this as well. So I think that to say that, you know, to simply reduce black middle class and the black petite bourgeoisie as people who want to be white. I think that is a misnomer. As someone who who's been involved in their fraternity life or whatnot, they actually pride themselves in a particular type of blackness. It's definitely a blackness rooted in the racial uplift narrative, that it is our role to show the lesser of these how, if you how to tie up a Windsor knot and put on a $3,000 suit and the perfect pair of shoes, you'll be able to get a nice job, and don't put on those gold teeth and act like an urban street urchin, and maybe you too, and another good book that talks about how that politics was manifest organizationally in the early 20th century, particularly, is a Torrey Reed's book on the National Urban League, Almost Not Opportunity, which discusses how the first iteration of the black political class, particularly through the National Urban League, uses uplift politics, right? Kind of like moral chastisement and role modeling. Instead of saying like we need to get like good union jobs for these folk, the focus is like, come on, y'all can't go outside with your bonnets on. That's not going to make us look good. And even as Preston Smith really elaborates in his book, Racial Democracy in the Black Metropolis, in all of this period of time, right, even up until the 50s, the argument that is being made is that since white people or the ruling class assume that black people are socially and culturally inferior or degenerate, that it's better for black people overall if we celebrate the functionality of the black middle class, because that will show the ruling class that we're all okay, and that will make things better for us, which is kind of part of the fundamental argument of respectability politics.
But Pascal, isn't that kind of, and I'm asking this question to everybody on the panel right now, isn't that the epitome of what those 90s shows became, right? We take the hood dude, i.e. Will Smith, West Philadelphia, born and raised, and you throw him in with proper black folk, and as Jose says, and please, I believe that there are links coming up, Jose, for all of your videos and your YouTube channel. We're going to put it in the chat. I'm definitely going to put it in the description of the show. I really appreciate the work you do. It's important to see that becomes the narrative of the Fresh Prince. If you abide by these bourgeois rules, pull your pants up, then you can make something of yourself.
And I wanted to be like Jose, you can even comment on something like in the beginning and even the forming of the Cosby Show, and something that was like kind of interesting to me was that the Huxtables, at least the parents, were supposed to be more working class, or at least we have more working class jobs. I think it was like mentioned limo driver, and I couldn't remember what the other job was, but
it's supposed to be like a plumber or an electrician. That blew me away, man.
Yeah, the thing about Claire is like there were a lot of different things that she was supposed to be before it started. It seemed like whoever was telling the story would have a different thing. She was either a plumber, electrician, a handy woman, lots of stuff. But Cliff was definitely supposed to be a limo driver. And apparently this was the idea Bill Cosby came up with himself. And it was eventually changed due to some input from both the producers on the show and Bill Cosby's wife, Camille. They thought it would be more interesting if they created this upper middle class family instead, making them a doctor and lawyer, so they would have this professional aesthetic going on.
And I at least have to wonder if, like, at the very least, would there be a little bit more analysis between racial tensions, or even some type of class analysis between like a limo driver, because at the end of the day, like the limo driver is like the buttress between like working class people and like elite. And so and I even think back to that the movie Parasite, where that's like the photo of the driver, where like the husband, he's driving the rich lady, and his face is just like, I'm about to run this thing off a cliff. That would, it kind of would necessarily change the whole narrative. You know, if he's coming home, you come home from work, the first thing you do is start bitching what happened. And, you know, he would have inevitably had to start bitching about rich people. But that's not exactly the narrative that they want to deliver.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of something I found while I was researching this. I was reading up about some of the shows in the 70s, and I didn't get to watch this, but I read a description of an episode of The Jeffersons that actually tackled something like this. I think it was in the first or second season. And it's when, for those who don't know, The Jeffersons, a family that starts off, I don't know if they were necessarily working or middle class, but they hit it big and they move up to this like fancy apartment, and suddenly they're in money. And George Jefferson's wife, I don't remember the character's name.
Wheezy.
Wheezy. Wasn't that her nickname?
Louise was her full name.
Louise. Okay.
Wheezy.
So she ran into a woman, another Black woman, who was at the apartment to clean for another apartment, and she assumed that Louise was also there for a similar reason. And suddenly, when she finds out that they're well off, I believe it's Louise, but suddenly has this sort of crisis where she realizes, like, how can I be friends with this person if we're now in this different class? And it introduced this like dynamic that sounded so interesting in a show, and like that was back in the 1970s, but the Cosby Show never even tried, or, well, there were attempts in later seasons, but it took that more sort of, I guess, what's the word I want? It became more of a lecture to working class folks rather than an attempt to create any sort of friendship. It would be like an episode where Bill Cosby sits down and he's literally lecturing to a class of young men, telling them how to get their lives in order, basically pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And like that was the attitude of the Cosby Show.
Definitely is consistent with the politics of the era. But what's even more fascinating to me, right, is that how much all of that kind of version of Black excellence is being replicated today in popular culture, particularly through the way Black capitalism is being romanticized, hip hop, and all of that, and all of the ways in which, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever perused, like, well, I guess you can call it Black Instagram. The consumerism, the level of like consumerism, floss, bling, bling kind of depiction that you see on Black accounts on Instagram. It's incredible, man. It's really, really incredible. And, it to me, it's just a large commentary on how capitalist realism has just kind of doubled down in the consciousness of Black tastemakers and culture creators, and eventually ends up influencing people. I'd like to hear Napoleon. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I see it all the time, and I feel the same way. And the other day, me and my friend, there's some known scammers out there that are known for scamming, like Black people, you know what I'm saying, and going on the gram, and luxury cars, dressed up in LA, and they're getting props from stars. They're shoulder to shoulder with the Mayweathers, et cetera, and mad followings, mad count. Like everybody wants that, and I read the comments just out of curiosity, and people like. So many people like, this is inspiration. Like, I love this, waking up to this. It makes me want to go hard. It makes me want to chase the bag. It's showing me that it's possible. And really, you're just getting high off nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't even know where this is coming from. This is all just imagery. This is all fluff. Like, this is somebody who just scammed a whole bunch of like people out of their money, so to speak, And I'm not just saying people are only scamming, there's other things. And the music industry is based off that. Like, they don't promote their albums. Like, I see a lot of like Facebook hip hop pages, for example. Even now, which is funny, I'm getting a lot more from also in France. So hip hop in France, and it's the same thing. It's how much money the guy's getting. What is he doing? Like yesterday, they started running a article on Lil Uzi Vert and said that he's the first person who's going to buy a planet. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if tomorrow I say on my Twitter that I want to buy the Andromeda Galaxy, is anybody going to write about it? You know what I'm saying? But it's just like, it's this is how ridiculous things is getting right now. And Black excellence has been co-opted. And I talk about it all the time by this definition, which means we need money. We need to have these goals. You see like couples, I see like Black couples, like, you know, on extravagant vacations, walking in slow motion. And it's just, it's like, are you really having fun? You know what I mean? Like, are you really enjoying this, or are you just constantly like doing a production around your life, you know, in order to get some likes? And it's I think it's toxic. And I think a lot of people are stuck in that bubble because that's all they've been fed for years and years and years coming up. And it's very hard to break, because as long as people talk about the money they got, that's all it is. That's all that matters. Like me and my friend were talking about Space Jam movie with LeBron James, right? And it made this much money, but the production costs were this much more. Right away, like the articles are saying, this is a win for LeBron James. The next day, I'm seeing LeBron James, the first billionaire athlete. Like that's the type. That's how that's the way they keep people hooked. And for some reason, there's a big enough, sizable enough segment of the population that is just mesmerized with this fantasy.
Another reason why I thought Jose, I don't know, maybe I was just in the right mood to watch your thing, Jose. It kept popping up on my videos I should watch, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'll click it." And I sat down, watched it, and I was like, damn, this is really good. I wanted to not like this, and this is really fucking good. And so I'm watching it, and I called up Pascal, and I don't know if he remembers this conversation. I was like, how do we go from Cosby to Wakanda? Because these two things live in such a fictional world. And that's, again, why I loved your breakdown, because you pulled that show out of Neverland to me and really placed it in the reality that it never really existed in. Wakanda as well. Remember when Negroes was putting on dashikis, going to the movie theater and crying and shit at Black Panther? And Wakanda to me, Zamunda, the Cosby's Brownstone, and make-believe New York. I mean, all this shit is so fantasy. Why are we so fascinated?
I think it stems from something I've talked about a lot on this show, from that piece I've written, the politics of redemption. That there is a theme amongst certain segments of Black America that believe that Black people need to be redeemed, to be made whole, to be vindicated in the eyes of white folk, in the eyes of the ruling class. We have to prove that we are great. We have to show and prove that we are wonderful, that we're amazing. We came from greatness. We came from wonderful civilizations. We when we were kings. All of this attempt, and by the this is not something that is just a recent phenomenon. If you read the early histories of Black nationalism, there's a really good book called The Golden Age of Black Nationalism by Wilson Moses. It talks about the early origins, ideological origins of Black nationalism. This whole connection to Africa, like, we must redeem the African continent in the eyes of the world to show us. This is part of the whole kind of mythology of the nationalist project at that time, is the connection to the belief that, we have to prove ourselves to our oppressors, because as if we prove ourselves, then somehow we will then lessen our oppression, which fundamentally demonstrates a lack of materialist understanding that your oppressors are oppressing you to extract resources and labor and wealth and capital from you and keep you in a capitalist system where you're at the bottom, because they are trying to basically use you as a fodder for economic development. And, it goes into this, belief that somehow if we convince, white folk that we're human, everything will be okay. What's disturbing to me is that that's somewhat in line with a lot of the contemporary anti-racism discourse that's coming out of people like Robin DiAngelo and others that are kind of like, that racism is about personal feelings. It's about, making people like you or changing the perception. And I think it's ultimately ridiculous because it divorces the way in which the racial otherization of particularly large segments of Black America is rooted in the political economy of capitalism and rendering to them to a point where capitalism deserves and requires, not deserve, but requires a certain number of people will be kicked out, can't function, can't get jobs. And those people will disproportionately be Black. So, this theme of needing to show and prove ourselves and redeem ourselves, the politics of redemption, vindicationalism, vindicate ourselves, has long historical origins in Black thought. And I think it's ultimately, it goes nowhere because it doesn't change anything. Amos Wilson, who's a famous kind of like Black nationalist thinker, there's a video of him where he says, and it's really great, I wish I could bring it up, where he says, if you think that telling these folk that you come from kings or telling them how much of a contribution that you've made to their society is going to change the way they treat you, you're a fool. Because what they will tell you is that good for you. But that's not changing anything because the power they have is too addictive to them. It creates too much for them. Simply telling them this stuff will do nothing. And I love that video because he's just kind of exposing like this whole vindicationist redemption posture that you've been in, or like when we were kings, or we come from pharaohs, or like or the great civilizations of Africa, or look at what my ancestors contributed to American society. That the people who have real power, he's letting you know that they're going to tell you, so what? So what? We got ours, and we're not going to let you get yours.
And actually, I'm curious as to if y'all seen the show Blackish, which is
man. I wasn't able to finish one episode, man.
Yeah. And then I'm wondering, Jose, if
his face when you said that, I can't even see Jose, and I saw his face go like this.
Yo, is Blackish at Black AF, or is that two different shows? Maybe I'm
different shows. So Black AF is a fake reality show of the man that writes Blackish.
Okay, it's Black AF that I seen. I couldn't finish, but yeah, keep going.
Well, and honestly, I mean, like Blackish is like thinking about it in the context of like all these different shows. It's kind of like when it's like Will Smith Will Smith grows up and he's got a family and it's you know what I'm saying? It's like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air actually gets his family and is one of the good ones, but he's still got the style, like he's the shoes. Hey, check out the Jordans. It is, like it's that.
So just people in the chat, I did a whole show. If you know Forrest, he's Ben Burgess' producer. He used to produce Jacobin show weekends. He did stuff with Michael Brooks. Forrest has a new show called Movie Extravaganza. Myself and Conan Neutron, two Bay natives, actually did a show about blind spotting and Sorry to Bother You. They want to know how I felt about this. So you can watch that. We definitely we had a 2-hour conversation about blind spotting.
But I do want to say though, is like with this Blackish show, how this was introduced to me, I was still in the Marine Corps, and a white guy, a white cat who is, I think he's from South Carolina. He's like, y'all, you got to watch the show. Oh, you never heard of it? I love this show. It's hilarious. It's so funny. And then I watched the show, and it then, like, you know, and this is what's, I think what's great is like Jose had laid this out pretty well in the little show, but in his critique of the Cosby Show, is like, this isn't a show for black people.
Yeah.
This is a show for white people to be comfortable with black people.
I mean,
Yo, but don't y'all feel like that with some of this commercial hip hop that comes out?
Oh fuck! Look, man.
Like from the music, it's like, is it really for black? Some of this stuff, who's it targeting?
Jose, listen to hip hop music at all?
a little bit.
If I was never in a room with like writers, Napoleon, like guys that write for Complex, being in that room, I can't remember what movie we watched. Of course I was on tour, and of course I was in some little fucking town that none of you motherfuckers have ever been to. So all of you can eat one. But I was shocked because in my mind, I think guys that write hip hop pieces look like Marcus.
Yo, that's the same way I felt when I first ever went into a major label and walked around in like Def Jam or walked around at Sony Music. And you look at these dudes and like the dudes promoting the music and getting hype about the music. And I'm thinking like, this guy can't talk to me about hip hop.
And then when it started working,
it's just I'm judging. I'm totally judging off appearance. Don't get me wrong, and behaviors and whatever. But I'm just like, wow, okay, I understand this a little bit better now, you know, because I peeked behind the curtain, so to speak.
Who's your A&R, record climber who plays an electric guitar?
You would wish,
right?
You would wish it was that guy, because at least he comes from music. You know what I mean? Like I'm telling you, it blew my mind. And when you get behind the curtain even deeper and you see who's behind like major festivals and shit like that, it's just so overly corporate. It's just so overly corporate.
I mean, you see what happens when you put Ja Rule in charge of some shit. I mean,
hey, Firefest. I'm saying it now for everybody. You guys are gonna call me all kind of names. I don't care. Firefest is not an aberration. You're going to see it again because that is the model of how festivals are going to look post-COVID.
Man, I thought you were about to say this. It was some dope shit, and it was all about to be good. Like, you're just saying some real shit. They'll make fun of you for like, oh, hey, people are gonna find out, like, because like that thing too was like someone made money off of that disaster.
Firefest gave you the model. It's just the people that were doing it were scammers. It wasn't the real festival people. That's why big bands started backing out at the end. They're like, oh, these motherfuckers don't have any real money. I'm out. Because you have to pay half up front. You want fucking Jay-Z and Green Day and all these people in the same place. It's going to cost you a lot of fucking money. And keep in mind that festival is never supposed to have a lot of people. So you were already selling exclusivity. So here we are in this post-COVID world, where we're already seeing shows. There was a promoter in the South, I want to say even in Florida, and he was like, if you have a vaccination card, it's $18 to get in. If you don't, it's $1,000.
We got a super chat here that wants to be answered here. How do you guys feel about Ryan Coogler as a filmmaker, Pascal, Jason, and the panel in the context of this discussion?
Ryan Coogler kind of came on the scene. He's actually from the same city I'm from, California. He came on the scene with what we call Fruitvale Station, about a horrible murder of a young man named Oscar Grant that was fighting on our like subway system called BART. He got shot by BART has their own police force, and he got shot by a cop as he was already on the ground with the cop on his neck. And he made a movie that is not a 100% accurate depiction of this gentleman's life, but still it humanized a person that definitely was just another a dead body shot by police. And it was a pretty good movie. I think the Creed movies are very enjoyable. I mean, he revitalized a franchise that was extremely deceased, going a whole different route with it. I watched Creed twice on a flight to Brazil.
I mean, yeah, Rocky was either going Sharknado or you had to do something completely different.
I love the fact that he tries to put his area in the movies. We'll see what he does with Black Panther 2. I mean, everybody has a critique and they're kind of upset about the superhero movie, but ultimately to me, it's a superhero movie. Like all this shit. I do agree with Torre a little bit that a lot of this shit is just fascistic in nature with these superhero movies. But Napoleon, what's your take on Coogler?
Well, that Fruitvale movie was good. I seen that. When it comes to I agree with everything you said. Creed is cool. It is what it delivers on what it promises to me. I have different opinions on this whole Black Panther Wakanda stuff because, being that I'm African and a lot of my friends I grew up with were African. we had a different experience growing up in America. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and not all of them like me I would like a chameleon. Like I don't have an accent when I speak. Some of them did. And it like the way I always thought the way Americans look at Africa was skewed. And, it went from being like, okay, it's like a whole bunch of dudes with G-strings hunting tigers to now it's like just a whole, it's kind of like Zamunda 2.0, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's not that either. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and if you look at that, the bourgeoisie in Africa are all people supported by the West one way or the other. The people, not all, but the overwhelming majority. And it's and I don't think it's a proper depiction of Africa. And even like I think Beyonce was jumped on the bandwagon too when she did that whole I think Kings or I forgot what she did on Netflix. Right.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
It was an extension of like this Wakanda theme and everything like that. But there's a soul that I feel when I think about Africa, but Africa's huge. Don't get me wrong. When I speak about Africa, I'm generalizing a lot that I think is missing from all of this. You know what I mean? It's not realistic. And a lot of people, they see what they get. It's just like rap once again, marketed to white kids in middle America who will think that these are how young Black people act. This is how Black people are and things like that. And when they watch these shows, they watch these sitcoms, whether it's the Cosby shows back then, the Fresh Princes, to whatever entertainment and whatever the Black elite is being, whatever they're promoting as what Black excellence should be,
So you're going to tell me.
I want to ask the panel a question, Jason, if you don't mind. Yeah. In the light of all of this kind of rather grim analysis which we're sharing, and I want Jason to chime in too. What is the potential for radical or oppositional Black politics with this kind of racialized capitalist realism that we're seeing in pop culture? Like, what is the potential of having, a working class politics come out of black activism or movement or a politics that challenges capitalism, empire, racism, sexism? What are the chances of us being able to overcome all of this noise, if you will?
I point to Bessemer, Alabama as a big reason why we are very disconnected to any sort of union movement. You have Chris Smalls, and again, I've said it on the show before. I know we have a lot of new viewers, so I'll say it again. Interviewed Chris Small last year around the time that he was kind of getting a lot of media attention when that story had leaked that they were going to put him in the forefront of this movement because they said he was dumb. I thought he was actually very intelligent, and it was a very, very interesting interview. And one thing I got from the interview was, much like, cats around me, he's from the same kind of neighborhood. He worked with the same type of people, ex-cons, shooters, single mothers. You name the stereotype, he was working with it. And what really radicalized him wasn't just an innate wanting to be part of this new black left. It was motherfuckers dying on the shop floor from this brand new disease that nobody gave a shit about. And it radicalized him so much so that he was like, you know what? There's going to be strength in numbers. So let's get this union because we can have some control over our working conditions. So it's not always just about pay. It's about working conditions, because they were already making for him, for where he lived, for the people that lived there, decent money. Bessemer, Alabama is a great example of that. When you don't have that Chris Smalls type guy on the shop floor going, hey man, it's not just about money. It's about working conditions. We're dying here. I think Chris said like 4 or 5 of his coworkers died.
Yeah, there's been more than one story, and like one sticking out where like that someone died and they had told him like get back to work, you know. Damn.
Yeah,
and like literally stepping over the body.
That's
like,
crazy.
This is something to that I mean guess to the question of like what are the, I guess, where can you know the message go within like entertainment and everything like that. I mean, I'll say, hey, I'm gonna plug my own show that I did with Napoleon and Nejma with Karthik just yesterday, talking about their album release. And like literally the whole concept is like listen, watch, engage with, you know, art that not only just is enjoyable, you know, like if you listen to Napoleon's music and you don't actually listen to what he's saying, it's good fucking rap music, like hands down. But also too of like, what are we actually hearing and can we uplift that? But at the end of the day, we got to realize like it's never gonna be just someone at Spotify that says, oh shit, Napoleon the Legend's hot, we're gonna pump him into the algorithm. You know, like that's just never gonna happen.
I want to add to that. I think thank you first of all, but I want to add to what Jason was saying. I think when you see the story of Chris and how he was quote unquote radicalized, or what opened his eyes, I think the abject failure of the system and the fact that it's hurting so many people and so many people are struggling, I think that it's going to end up eating itself up. But everything is going to have to be grassroots, because it's not going to get the push from the machine, so to speak, or from the big media, whether it's art, whether it's organized movements to unionize, whether it's movements to stop drilling and things like that. I think you're going to hear more and more voices from scattered everywhere of people just who've had it. Because I think I use my personal experience where I felt I was tamed by shows like The Cosby Show, to bring back José, by pop culture, by things like that. I thought I could rap my way into, you know, into a mansion, you know what I'm saying? And doing this and that. And not saying that I'm making music and I'm living, I'm paying my rent off it. It's just that I realized that the way me and my friends grew up, it's like we had big aspirations, big dreams, and like it gets broken down as you grow up, and then you see what the industry is about. You see what the workforce like working like brings you when you try hard and you're not getting the right promotions, and you see people rising and stuff like that. That it's not a meritocracy. It gets on people's nerves, and I think with shows like this, with people doing art that's revolutionary, that's radical, I think more and more like. I'm just hoping that we could create like links and stronger communities and pockets all around and start just growing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's all like that's so true, because when I'm looking at a lot of what's stuff coming out of Hollywood, I mean, when you talk about like wanting to change the system, why would the mainstream ever want to change a system where they're making billions of dollars? Yeah. So they're clearly financially motivated to produce entertainment that, even if it's superficially seeming to talk about things like bettering the world or some sort of systemic reform, ultimately it's going to hit back on some sort of conservative message where the status quo is maintained, because that's just in their interests. Like going through all these old sitcoms, I've done a couple of them now. They all, pretty much every single one of them feels conservative at its heart. They very rarely ever break that. And like the one exception, and even then it was only barely, it's this very, pardon me, little known show called Dinosaurs, where it was like people in giant puppet costumes. And I remember this one scene where they were like talking about making TV better for people and educating people. So a cop show wouldn't be about like chasing down some horrible guy so he can be put behind bars. The cops would stop someone and like give him a Marxist lecture about how he's in the underclass and he's being exploited and he's really a victim here. And, you know, that show did not last long. It lasted about 70 something episodes. And when you listen to the stories of the people who worked on it, they say like, we were basically allowed to do nothing because no one was paying attention. They thought it was just a dumb show with puppets. And they were just like, as long as you have the baby hitting the dad with the frying pan, we don't care what's in the show. It's just a dumb puppet show.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
On the show, guys.
And Jose, I don't know if you can even go into a little bit of the contrast of that the Dinosaurs movie, because I know, and like especially with the kids, because you'd gone through in the video and kind of explain like nothing ever bad really happened to the kids. The kids never really were in, you know, as far as the hospitals. As far as the Cosby show. But I remember like one of the dinosaurs, like you like did steroids and he had all the spikes coming, you know, and like they actually had to work through the problems within the dinosaur family.
I know. I mean, there was literally an episode where the son on the dinosaur show, Robbie, gets sent to war. And like when he comes back, he's like brainwashed and he's talking about like, oh, we could have beaten them. And like, oh, it was so great. I felt like so proud fighting for my homeland. And like his dad's like holding him. It's like, you're just a kid. You shouldn't be like thinking like this. And it was such an interesting depiction of war. And it shows how it doesn't just like cause death and destruction. It changes the people who participate in it. And like that would never happen to the Huxtables. Like the very thought of like any child in the Huxtable family even approaching a risky situation it's almost unthinkable. It's always like, you know, they know a friend who, there were like 1 million friends on that show who had like bad stuff happening to them. But, like, Huxtable, I
think it's like Wildo's like, oh no, I was holding it for a friend, and like that's the story. Like that's the lie that every kid feeds mom when they find the shit. Like, no, I'm holding it for a friend, and then they get to slap, and it's like whatever flushed down the toilet or thrown away. Like that literally not even true. That just doesn't happen in real life.
I can't imagine a parent just being like, oh, well, of course, you're just holding it for a friend. We believe you. And then they go their separate way. And then the kid steps up and he's like, no, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to bring the guy who had the joint and he's going to tell you the truth. And it's meant to be wholesome, but it just seems so ridiculous. It's like, it's a fantasy world.
Yeah. It's safe.
Watching stuff like that with fresh eyes was very, very interesting. Not to say that I put the Cosby Show on any sort of like crazy pedestal, but it was a staple of my growing up. You know, Thursday nights at 8:00. You know, that was punishment for me as a little kid. Like, oh, you fucking didn't do your homework. Well, you can't watch Cosby. And then as I got a little older, you can't watch Arsenio. So.
Wow, Pamela Davis was like that. No Cosby for Jason.
Yes. My mom deprived me of Cosby and Arsenio. Fuck me up. Then my mom is the same woman that let me watch Eddie Murphy Raw at like 11, 12 years old.
Oh,
everything.
I was watching Bernie Mac way too young. That was one that like my parents had let slip through.
Mac or the show Bernie Mac, like Def Jam Bernie Mac.
Def Jam Bernie, like his comedy. This is like before he had his show.
So you was going to grade school going, I ain't scared of you, motherfucker.
But is it, well, and I don't know if that's might be, you know, even worth kind of diving into is you get these comedy stars and not Cosby, you know, Cosby was never that type of stand-up. But yeah, I mean, like Bernie Mac, I think, you know, and then like, and even you tied like Ice Cube going from gangster rapper to now we're just making about movies about kids and cars, you know, like, is there that pacification that has to be done in order for someone that even had that mantle of like, nah, motherfucker, real, to now I'm in the like mainstream.
I mean, what would Ice Cube be? He's like 50 now. What would he really be if he was sitting around here with an AK-47, you know, yelling about the hood still? Like, we couldn't really take him that fucking seriously.
No, man, that's what's up. That's no.
You know, how seriously can you take a gajillionaire that's been a gajillionaire since he was like 19 years old?
Yeah, word.
You know,
word.
saying like it's hard out here for a pimp. Like, I just can't listen to you tell that story anymore. Like, Will Smith can't be the kid from West Philadelphia as a 50-year-old man. He has to be an action hero, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I get like what I would have.
Dog is still doing it. Snoop is still doing it.
Is he really?
I was thinking about Snoop. He's still the guy that's getting high, you know, your drunk uncle type, you know what I mean? That type of.
He's a drunk
with Netflix specials about his teen football league and what he's like.
Yeah.
He had a reality show with his real life. He's been with the same woman since like high school.
Which I mean, I guess what I would have liked to have seen, you know, because like if you take someone like Ice Cube and like where just in like his story, especially Ice Cube when he talk about NWA, like, yeah, like literally, hey, once you get the bajillion dollars, what I would have liked to see is, hey, can we create something that is to make sure that, yeah, young black people who are coming, and anybody coming up in the hip hop game doesn't get fucked, you know, doesn't have those same type of things.
They did. It's called Boys in the Hood. No, that didn't do it for you. Jose, have you seen Boys in the Hood?
No, I have not.
Jose, you got to come with us to movie night, and we got to show Jose like 5 hood movies. You got to watch Boys in the Hood.
Michael Brown says true. Snoop still be on that crib shit sometimes, and it's cringe. He's a grandfather now.
He's a crypt keeper.
Do you look? I remember when Snoop was on the cover of Rolling Stone, and white people lost their minds. Like, this is the most dangerous cover ever. It's a black dude. He's got braids. Do you think that about Snoop now? I saw him on the commercial walking down the beach handing out beers to everybody.
I'd let Snoop watch Kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, if there's like, oh, hey, there's a bunch of 13-year-old. Yeah, like, let Snoop chill with them for a minute. Like, Snoop is not dangerous. And he barely, like, I don't know, do you ever presented, though? You know, he was kind of the chill one in the room, even though all the, you know, even talking about all the shit's going on.
I will say this. There are older rappers that still come by the studio, not dangerous, don't want to be around their entourage.
But the entourage is where the problems happen. Right?
Napoleon, am I lying?
No, you for real about that, man. I mean, they know better. They know better, though, because, you know, they're plus, you know, some of them are really from that element, first off, you know what I mean? And they craft their public image really well, but, you know, they know not to play around when they, or, you know, you should know not to play around when they come around. That's what I'm rather say.
Most rap, especially these younger dudes, most of them, they're pretty cool. I did want to bring this up. Can you guys see this? I know it's pretty small. I'll try to make it bigger. Can you see it?
It's too small, man. It's too small.
Can the audience see it? I know my blind co-host has issues seeing it. This is from Ebony magazine from 1973 called The Black Middle Class. And this particular article is about a man that did a study on Harlem, and about 250,000 people were included in this study. So almost, I think he said about 75% of the population of Harlem. Excuse me. And in this study, he had found that the black middle class and the black lower class actually kind of worked together politically, because Harlem was one of those areas where a lot of the upward mobility was from government jobs. We talk about popular culture. One of me and Pascal's movies we talk about when we're off camera is "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker," and one of the funny lines in "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker" is when Keenan Ivory Wayans' character meets the now deceased pro-black Panther type dude. He's talking about getting all the brothers together because they got to take down the man, and the dude goes, "Well, we can't do it because everybody got government jobs." So there's a lot of truth to black people getting a lot of upward mobility through government jobs, right? And so because of that, the lower class and the middle class, politically work together because they definitely need to keep that government largesse. But in areas like Atlanta at this time, where a lot of the black middle class came from the private sector, you definitely didn't have any sort of class consciousness. And towards the end of the article, they're asking the man that did the study, do you have any solutions? And one of the big complaints he had was the political machine and the way it was operating in the post Great Society era, right? So the post Lyndon Baines Johnson era. And he says that is, the political machine has been replaced with community organizations which obtain public and philanthropic funds to service recipients, not clients. And what do recipients give up in return? Nothing. A patron-client relationship like that between a political boss and his constituents builds bases of political pressure and tends to collectivize the mass. A patron-recipient relationship like that between the administrators of the Great Society programs of the 1960s and blacks does not build local bases of political power, and therefore is dysfunctional to the black community's political development. The first ties in service programs with politics. The second severs service programs from politics, a fundamental mistake. Why is this so? Hamilton finds that more than half of Harlem's 212 organizations receive public sector money. Since they are not branches of a central agency, they are fragmented like so many pieces of broken pottery. They do not work with other organizations. Thus, for example, Central Harlem has no working arrangements with West Harlem, and neither community is turned into East Harlem. They do not have to think collectively because individually they have created their own network of allegiances. Anyone confronting a director, usually middle class, of one of these organizations and pleading, "Let's get ourselves together," is likely to be asked, "For what? Are you going to take care of my $80,000 grant this year? Are you going to ask me to do something to jeopardize that?" That was written in 1973.
It was also based on a study by the man Hamilton. You're talking about Charles Hamilton, is the author of Black Power with then Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, the book that came out in the late 60s, trying to explain what the philosophy of Black Power was, as a matter of fact. And, that talks about something that we've mentioned before about how foundation largesse and sometimes Great Society money kind of creates this black political class and separates it from the aspirations of, working class black folk because of their ability to be more skilled at soliciting those funds and managing those funds and and governing over those foundations. And what's also interesting is that takes place a year after that 1972 Gary Convention that we talk about, where you see that black political class starts to really, really kind of develop. And the question becomes, Jason, really, really important, right? Is that, one of Adolph Reed's kind of criticisms is that Black power really becomes kind of nothing more than ethnic patronage politics in blackface. Like, for example, in Chicago in the 50s, you had the Irish. In New York, at one time you had the Italians. And that the best aspiration that it could have been would have been a replication of ethnic patronage politics, but in blackface. But the question becomes is that what happens to that ethnic patronage politics when cities in the 70s are deindustrializing and they're all in budget crises? You know, they all, in other words, you know, the whole patronage machine that allows the Irish networks to work in the 50s is because, you know, this is during the New Deal, there's money pumping in, there's largesse. But now when you have the Black political class coming in, when New York City is broke, the cities are broke, you know, stagflation is growing, what is going to be the return on an investment on Black power and Black politics when there's literally no money to keep that ethnic patronage politics alive?
And I don't want to get too much into some other things that the article talked about, because it definitely gets into a theory that was very popular around that time. That's definitely popular now, which is the Black colony, the ghetto being
the internal colony.
The internal colony. The next, I'm actually working on it, about to start working on it this weekend, is part 2. Part 1 should be airing this week on Zero Books. My series on Cedric Johnson's essay about the forgotten Huey Newton, and part 2 definitely going to deal with him dealing with the internal colony theory. And for those that don't know, Kamala Harris's dad, Donald, wrote a great Marxist critique on the internal colony. But you can find this Ebony magazine, Google Books archive has Ebony from 1950 to now. They're all archived. And this one's from August of 73. If you want to just get right to it, it's a great, I thought it was a pretty interesting read. There's definitely some Black nationalism in there that I didn't necessarily agree with all of it, but in total, one of the solutions that the gentleman that wrote it was talking about is something that we see happening in places like Jackson with Cooperation Jackson, which is, he's like, you know, a lot of this money that we call welfare, and this goes into some of that internal colony theory, is going right out to people that don't live in the area. So the welfare recipients are absentee landlords, and people like that, right? So one of his solutions was, you know, taking some of the money that we're getting and putting it into collectively buying property and having collective ownership, co-op ownership, like you see in Cooperation Jackson, or what you saw with the Moms for Housing, when it came to trying to purchase more homes for people. So I'll put a link up in the chat for the Ebony piece. Reading Ebony from back in the day was kind of shocking. I definitely put a link up to Jose's YouTube channel. You guys need to check it out. This dude's Cosby. It didn't feel like an hour and 49 minutes, man. I looked up, I was like, damn, that shit was good. I was kind of mad it was over. So,
were you also watching it at 1.5 speed?
No, I was not. I'm not like Marcus. Marcus has to watch a lot of YouTube stuff because he is what you young people call a shit poster. Pascal, do you have anything to say?
Man, I'm enjoying the vibe. This is a really cool conversation that we had today. I think we covered.
I was muted, but I want to defend myself. All the House and Senate hearings also are on YouTube, and that's when I learned to put it on to 1.5 speed, so I don't have to listen. So I don't have to listen to these dusty ass legislators take my life from there. Just slow speech. That's why. But it helps to get it in.
And Napoleon has a new record out. Is it out or is it coming out?
No, it's out. It came out yesterday, I think. Yeah. Alter Ego. It's a joint album with Nejma Nefertiti, so it's pretty unique. You know, we were friends. We met each other in New York doing programs for kids, like workshops and different schools, Rikers Islands, things like that. We were just friends, and she just happened to be dope, you know what I mean? And so we just did something together. We were doing, actually, we were supposed to put out a vinyl on the day of release. But what happened, we made a deal with this record company, independent record company in Netherlands, and his name is Richard Dreisen. He passed away like about a month ago, just suddenly. So that put a halt to that. So we started a Bandcamp campaign to raise money to get the vinyl created. It's the first time we did something like that. But since it's a joint project, it's easier for us to do that. So if you like vinyl, you know, consider joining the campaign. If we reach our goal, they're gonna press it and you're gonna get a copy. If we don't reach our goal, you'll get your money back. So, but check out the album. It's called Alter Ego.
Someone asked us about No Name's music. I don't know if I've ever heard it.
I've heard one of her songs. I thought she was very talented. I think her politics are interesting. I think she's really kind of tried to do the black left thing. I think she'd be an interesting guest. I don't know how we can reach out to her.
I don't know anyone that knows her.
She's dope. Like what I heard of her, she could rap.
I think she does some stuff with the Black Power Media folks. But
I think she might. Yeah, I don't. I thought she had some connections to was it the Blacks for Peace?
Black Alliance for Peace.
Black Alliance for Peace. Yeah, I thought there was some connection there because she does. I mean, and like I've seen like I guess an evolution recently. Because she has been doing like this book club and like actually like getting into sharpening the politics and everything like that.
I applaud her effort to kind of expand her politics and whatnot, which I think is good.
And also with her audience, I think that's like what's real dope. She's not doing it just sitting in her house. You know, she's actually engaging, you know, her audience and trying to grow and learn and all that shit. So, No Name, if you see this, we think you're dope.
There you go. Maybe No Name's watching. I'm always surprised at who's watching the show. You never know who the fuck is watching. I will say that.
Hit subscribe, like, hit the bell. Become a patron if you wish.
Actually,
is there anything you're working on right now?
Me personally, trying to do
Jose.
I said Jose. I think it's me. Okay, don't be yelling at me because I thought you said my name.
You don't even sound French.
It's more of a Spanish name. So yeah, I'm working on a couple of things right now. I'm working on, of course, videos for my YouTube channel. I've got not ready to talk about the next sitcom retrospective, but it's in full swing. And in the meantime, I've been reading some truly awful books by conservative pundits, and I'm going to be making a video about that soon.
Yeah.
Did you do a thing about reading Ben Shapiro's book?
I did read his novel, which is one of the worst books I've ever read. It's my most popular video, though, because I guess people like laughing at him. I cannot recommend people avoid it enough. It's
what was it about?
That's a good question. It was about it was like there were 5 different plot lines going on. There was like this young guy who was supposed to be a general fighting terrorists, but there was also this side plot about like a farmer who's trying to control her land and the government's trying to take it. And there was another plot about like it was clearly inspired by like Black Lives Matter, where it's, oh God, I don't even like describing it because it's like the most racist plotline I've ever heard, where like protests are fomented by this group because they're like setting up kids to be shot by cops. And
oh my God.
Is that like the real Black Lives Matter? Like that's really what they think? Like they sit there in a room, those 4 women like sat there in a room, they're like, how do we get more children murdered?
Yeah. And it's all like from the perspective of like the poor cop who just was following his training. I'm like,
I was writing for Law and Order.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something like that.
I think Gene was the one who was telling me that he was like that Ben Shapiro was like a frustrated Hollywood screenwriter.
Yeah, his dad.
He tried his hand at it. It never caught on.
Wasn't Ben Shapiro's dad like he owned a studio or ran a studio in Hollywood or some shit like that?
Oh, I didn't know
He is a
that.
Hollywood creation. Like the only reason he's famous is because a Hollywood producer liked the cut of his jib, and they got some like billionaire money to finance his little news operation. They gave him a makeover. They literally invested millions of dollars into this guy to make him seem like some sort of intellectual.
That's crazy.
Ben Shapiro is the perfect combination of like Andy going to Cornell and Michael Scott.
Yeah.
Damn. I mean, it's funny when you take him out of his little ecosystem or echo chamber, like he falls apart like so quick. Like I seen a video the other day of him and Neil deGrasse, and he started trying to talk about transsexuals in sports or something like that. And Neil deGrasse just destroyed him like easily. Like the guy didn't even have anything to say. And y'all seen the one with the English that in the UK with the conservative, and he was talking about different things.
That's hilarious.
He didn't even realize the guy was a conservative. That was the funniest part. Like he thought the guy was a leftist or something like that.
Like just the idea though, like if you're gonna go on the BBC, like you have no idea what that news organization is at all if you think you're gonna get on there and there'd be some fucking lefty on the show. You know, like BBC doesn't do left news.
He doesn't know that. You know what I'm saying? Like I said,
that's just how stupid. That's how dumb he is.
You know.
But that's what I'm saying. You can't take him out of their like well produced little shell, because then they fall apart like this quick. And to plug rest in peace to Michael Brooks, like his book, where he eviscerates Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, and Dave Rubin, which is a little bit more comical, but he just goes line by line and just like destroys all their arguments in that book.
Yeah, and it's so true. They have that little ecosystem, and once they're out of it, they're done. And one of the interesting thing about reading their books, they're sort of undistilled, what passes for intellect. They will write things. I can't believe someone are like writing these lines. Like there was one in a book that was like, it was trying to argue that the United States is not an imperialist country. Like there's no element of empire. It's like, well, did you know that the line was something, I'm paraphrasing, it's something like, did you know that, when the US became independent, they were fighting against an imperial power and they were fighting against imperialism. So how can they be imperialist if the Revolutionary War was fighting against imperialism?
Man, no.
I mean, has he never heard of Theodore Roosevelt? Like Manifest Destiny?
I actually did a word search for the term Manifest Destiny in these books, and no one mentions it. I was like, that's a pretty big part of 19th century American expansion westward.
Expansion is the we had a whole show about the residential schools.
Oh God!
Because you can't understand the U.S. empire without looking at the residential schools.
Yeah, right now.
One episode. We got Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz coming on August 17th. That's gonna be a whole nother discussion.
This is just like blinks and 800 military bases spread across the world.
Okay. With Latin America, like all the the Middle East, or
It's silly. It's silly. Arguing America's not an empire, that's just silly.
So when the U.S. invaded Haiti in 1915, what was that like?
Mutual aid. That was something else.
but you'll be surprised how many people around the world, even in Europe, certain European countries, who just they don't really realize that their country is like an imperial power. Like there's so many people that don't even perceive it that way, and it's easy to live in America and not see it as such. Like we're it's an insulated bubble where we're caught, distracted by the Cosby shows and et cetera. You know what I mean? And you don't see how this food is going into your grocery store. You don't see why the gas prices are so low, and certain commodities are artificially low, et cetera, et cetera. You don't notice that. Where your cell phones, stuff that makes your cell phones, the lithium batteries, and you have blatant instances like when Elon Musk says jokes, or is it a joke when he says we could coup anybody we want? Like that's a blatant like statement right there by one of the oligarchs. It's crazy.
Sorry, I disappeared. Deep state.
Disappeared, Jason. What happened?
My phone died.
I do want to say, Jose, if you ever have the chance, there's a book called Irresistible Revolution. It's written by a former Space Force commander. And you ask yourself, well, why is he former? The Space Force just started. Well, he started talking shit about the Secretary of Defense and cultural Marxism taking over the military and wrote a book about it. And in this book, within like a few paragraphs, ties the Illuminati to Marx and Hitler, you know, and then the whole point is that Black Lives Matter is using this ideology to inject socialism in the military. And like this mother wrote like 200 pages of this nonsense, and it's like it's wild. It is absolutely wild.
I don't know how to feel about a recommendation like that.
I mean, well, that's the thing is like I don't bring up this book often, but it's like you dive into this stuff. Me and some of the people at Left Flank, we read it because we were going on another podcast talking of just that goes into these right-wing conspiracy weirdos, and this one happened to be a Space Force commander, and so you know it.
Someone is asking Pascal where he can find Adolph Reed's work on the Frankfurt School.
Check out Stirrings in the Jug. It's a good book where he talks about his analysis of Black popular culture. I have another book here. It's in my pile somewhere. But check out Stirrings in the Jug.
Pascal is going to, for the Ask Pascal, or I'm sorry,
The Mau
Mau Hour with Pascal, that is a patrons only show. The last Wednesday of every month, he will be doing a deep dive on his love for Adorno.
Anyway.
I'm lying. It's not true.
Minion Death Cult. Yeah, and I apologize. That was the podcast I was on. I should have shouted out. Thank you.
Adolph will have a podcast at some point, I think. Well, on that note, we've been talking for well over an hour. I want to thank our guests. It literally came through from 2 different countries. So thank you guys.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having
Napoleon, mon frère, je suis très content de votre connaissance encore sous ce programme.
Mon frère, merci beaucoup. Man, it's crazy out there in your spot in Haiti, man. It's hot over there.
I know.
Man.
I was chaud. Les choses est très chaud en Haïti maintenant.
Très chaud. You know what though, real quick, not to get into that, it just reminds me of Comoros, man. Like, you know, like a few presidents have been killed throughout history in Comoros by mercenaries and things like that. It's almost the same thing that just happened.
Wow.
Yeah. Bob Dinar I think he killed 2 presidents at 2 different times. Yeah. So it's like, it feels like the same type of thing, you know, and it's proxy from France, but France will never admit it. You know what I mean? But you know how it is.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, yeah, we can't get it. But there's some of the stuff I keep hearing from the Haiti, that whole whatever happened is just like.
You're never going to expose them to the real hands.
Yeah. It's just more questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing is pretty insane, and Pascal apparently has become the person du jour. Take that, French guy. Talk about Haiti. I can't even get a production meeting with this dude anymore. He's like, sorry, I'm off to another one. Toodaloo.
Au revoir.
Yo, I gotta give props to Pascal. Like, he was going off on a Majority Report on Haiti. He broke down that whole history like in a short period of time. And I had just read the book, The Avengers of a New World, about that.
It's a good book.
I just finished that book. That book is great. You know what I mean? It's horrific too.
Summary of the Haitian Revolution in 25 minutes.
Yeah, no, you killed that. I was telling my boy, man, he's dropping bars right now, man.
So, Jose, if you ever want to do a thing about Haiti, you got to hit up Pascal.
Yeah, if it comes up, I'll definitely hit him up.
Unless you've seen his Majority Report episode.
You're a de facto ambassador, Pascal, for your country. For real.
Yo, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Napoleon.
The Haitian
They're gonna put the flowers around your head when you touch down next time, man.
So Chairman Pascal is going to return to Haiti lead the people in revolution? Is that what's
Revolution 2.0, right?
Yes. Mouthpiece revenge.
It all goes away when Wyclef shows up at fucking Pascal's door.
Get out of here, motherfucker.
Wyclef shows up at Pascal's door with fucking the rest of the Fugees, and a tear rolls down Pascal's cheek, and they're like, we want you to be on the score part 2. I'm talking about Haiti.
A lot of people became viewers of our show as a result of that Majority Report. Shout out to the Majority Report, man.
Yeah, they were like, who is this black dude that's just yelling at white people willy nilly cutting them off?
Gene series, like, you made the white people scared, Pascal.
Yeah.
Why do you make Gene sound like
a French pimp?
oh shit. Okay, on that note, guys, let's take off. Thank you, Jose and Napoleon. Of course, thank you, Marcus and Pascal. Is Bananas Foster French? Is that a French thing?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Doesn't sound French.
Foster.
I don't know, man. Maybe I doubt it is. Unless
butter
it's an Americanized French thing. You know how they do.
Some bananas Foster. Pancakes. Me and my badass little kid.
Crepes.
Thank you guys again for coming on. And Marcus, have you seen the new He-Man?
No, I haven't. I saw that it came up though. What is it? Netflix.
Apparently, it's woke He-Man, and everybody's mad.
Man,
is Jose old enough to remember He-Man?
No, but did they finally make him gay in the new one?
Yo, that could be the true origin story.
Do you want me to spoil it? I haven't seen it, but someone gave a spoiler. So should I spoil it?
No, don't spoil the He-Man, man. I might go watch that.
Don't spoil the He-Man. I won't spoil He-Man, but no, he is not. But I won't spoil it.
Oh man,
but if you did a He-Man, a new He-Man thing, that would be very interesting because right now it actually was like trending on Twitter because so many dudes are pissed.
Because He-Man is woke, and one of the women is like, wearing like Black Lives Matter T-shirts. While she's
There's no black people in Eternia. The black person is Skeletor.
Skeletor's the brother?
Yes.
Skeletor's lives matter then.
Skeletor's from Southside Eternia. He got the fucked up castle. He's always making gumbo in that big ass cauldron.
I actually made some gumbo last night. Hey, me and Skeletor.
So Skeletor, he's got a whole crew of fucking goofy ass hoodlums. Beast Man is ghetto as fuck.
Yo, is it actually worth watching for real?
Dan Larson, friend of show, loves it. I watched a review not by Dan Larson. This person did not love it. And the reason why he didn't love it had nothing to do with the quality of the show, the animation. It was just because of something that happens.
So it's the cartoon version that's on Netflix?
The new cartoon. It looks awesome, but people don't. Some still mad Jose said, is he gay?
It's literally the only way he had to go.
What it was gonna be? All the backlash I thought that was gonna be. It's not that. It's you just gotta watch it. Since you said don't ruin it, I won't tell you. But it's if I told you what it was, you'd be like, that's the dumbest shit. You're mad about that? Yeah, people are mad about that. And it has nothing to do with like any real shit. They're just like, this woke shit is taking over everything, and we can't have too much woke shit. So,
on that note,
I'm gonna go make Bananas Foster and watch the new He-Man with my kid. So watch old cartoons from the 80s. Have a good one, guys.